Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. We are back, the SportsLine Model Show. I am your host, Mackenzie Brooks, joined by the team behind the numbers, John, Jake, Steven, and Derek. We have a great show lined up for you, as always. We'll start with our MLB Daily Picks, and then we're going right into the fantasy marathon. We talked about receivers last week, so we're going to really hit home on running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends, where we see some differences from the Fantasy Football Today experts, with all due respect, but we like to see some more diversity and show you where we think there's different value. So we'll get started right away. We'll go into our MLB Daily Picks with John and Jake. And we have a lot on the slate today, some home run Dinger Tuesday props, but we'll start with some model picks.
Yeah, so I guess first one we can go today, we can go to, I guess, the Phillies we'll start with. So the Phillies are playing the Giants today. Phillies money line is our favorite play. It's minus 135 against the Giants on Caesars is your best value right now, or at least when we checked before the show. So Kyle Harrison is the Giants' top prospect. He's being called up to the major leagues to make his debut on the road against a team that they could be facing in the playoffs. That's a really tough ask for a rookie, especially against a team that has the fifth highest weighted on base average in the league against lefties since the All-Star break in the Phillies. And Kyle Harrison is a lefty with an interesting arm slot. He touches around 95 to 96. He has two other solid pitches, changeup and a slider. However, in AAA, there are some things we have to realize. He's only pitched 67.2 innings in 21 starts. So do the math. That's not very deep. He's only going slightly over 3 innings per game. He has also allowed 48 walks in the 67.2 innings pitched, so he can really lose in terms of command. And then he also had 109 strikeouts in 67.2 innings pitched, as I mentioned. So he gets a lot of his outs via strikeout. So what that tells me is he has a ton of stuff, great stuff that he can't totally control yet. And he gives up a lot of walks, strikes out a lot of batters, and that causes a lot of pitches to be thrown, and it makes it so he can't get deep into games. So Taijuan Walker on the other side, he's shown a few signs of regression back to his mean with 6 walks in his last outing, but he's still facing the worst team in the league in weighted on base average against righties since the All-Star break and the Giants. These bullpens have been pretty similar since the break. But as I mentioned earlier, Kyle Harrison likely won't get very deep. So the Giants bullpen is going to be extended while the Phillies bullpen shouldn't. And the Phillies are also 13-8 at home this season, or 13-8 since the All-Star break, while the Giants are 7-13 on the road since the All-Star break. So I really like the Phillies, even though it's on the short money line. I think they take care of the rookie today.
Yeah, so when a top prospect comes up, a lot of people like to bet on them just because they know the name. And that's where you see the money is moving towards San Francisco. And I follow prospects a lot. I know Kyle Harrison's biggest problem throughout his career has been his walks. And then you look at the Phillies lineup: Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber. Those are all veterans who are going to know that this guy is filthy stuff, but they're going to wait till they see some strikes. And Steven highlighted that Taijuan Walker has better home numbers than road numbers. I agree with everything that John said. I like the Phillies here.
Yeah. You mentioned it. So this line opened at minus 154. Do you recommend still waiting on this, or you think it's time to act now?
No, I think you got to play it right now. I think the line's actually bottoming out right now. I think they'll see it at around minus 135, maybe even minus 130 at some spots. But I think as soon as teams see lineups and likely see JT Realmuto in the lineup, because he got the day off 2 days ago in the Williamsport game. So he was off on Sunday. So I highly doubt he gets another day off this early. So the Phillies should have their full lineup in against, like we mentioned, a tough rookie. It's a tough matchup for him.
Right. So we'll move over. We're talking about another model pick here with the Astros money line versus the Red Sox. Similar value here, minus 145 at Caesars.
Yeah, we'll go, I guess, to my next pick now. The Astros, minus 145 against the Red Sox on Caesars. Once again, this was the best line that I found most recently, but it's been fluctuating. I've seen it get up to minus 155, 158. I've seen a minus 152 or 142 as well already. But Justin Verlander struggled in his last outing, but he's pitched well overall for the Astros. He also heads home for this start, which is big. Tanner Huak is coming off the IL for his first start since June 16th.
Wow.
So we really don't know how long he's going to pitch or how effective he'll be, especially because even when he was healthy and he would pitch, he doesn't get deep into games. He usually walks a lot of guys, strikes out, a lot of deep counts. So he doesn't get deep in the game. That means that the Red Sox bullpen is going to be extended. The Astros bullpen might have a couple of guys unavailable, but they're ranked 9th in the league in bullpen ERA since the All-Star break. The Red Sox ranked 18th. The Astros also got Kyle Tucker back in the lineup from an illness the other day, and they're finally starting to play their best lineup. It seems like Yainer Diaz is in the lineup pretty much every day now. So I like the Astros to win this series at home. I don't think we can look too much into the Astros getting swept their last series and the Red Sox sweeping.
Right.
I think this is a completely different series here.
No, I agree. And I wanted to say something about Yainer Diaz. I ran a sim because I saw John say that it's time that they play him every day. And if he is their everyday starter, the Astros World Series percentage goes up 3% compared to Martin Maldonado being their primary starter at catcher. And Maldonado, you see, like, everyone's like, he's a better defensive catcher. That's not true. Maldonado is not as regressed defensively. Yainer Diaz has 18 home runs as a rookie. And so that's a big difference, 3% in the World Series.
Right. And what do you guys think about this here with him to get over 1.5 walks?
I like it.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming off an injury, I like it. The problem is, I don't know how far he's going to go in the game. If he gives up a couple of hits and he's struggling, they might pull him early, but it could be because they pull him early because he gives up a couple of walks early as well.
Right.
I like the play, especially minus 130. I don't think that's juiced that heavily.
I think when you're injured and you come off the IL and the first lineup that you face, and even the first guy that you face is Jose Altuve, then you get Alex Bregman, Jordan Alvarez, you're going to start trying to spot your pitches perfectly. I think he'll likely have at least one walk in the first inning. So I think he's got 2 walks in him for the outing for sure.
Yeah, I like that. I like that play.
We'll move over to our last model pick of the day, Brewers money line versus the Twins. Better value here on FanDuel at minus 104.
Yeah, I like this play a lot. The Brewers are hot. They just they're coming off a sweep over the Rangers. I think they're hitting at the right time. South Relic, one of their top prospects, is up. He's been hitting since he returned from injury. I like this Brewers team to get hot right around now. And I think at home at minus 104 on FanDuel is a pretty good price. It was at minus 104 on FanDuel, minus 105 on DraftKings. So there's not much of a difference. So whichever book you like there, whichever book you like better, I would just go there. I don't think the 1 cent's worth anything that much. But you see Steven's highlighting Wade Miley has a 2.86 ERA and 12 starts at home over the last 2 seasons. So he's been really good at home. You see his whip is a 1.06 compared to 1.41 on the road. He's not allowing a lot of base runners. I like that a lot. And Bailey Ober, he's a little worse on the road at home, not significantly, but still he's a little worse. And he has 6 losses on the road compared to just 3 at home.
Yeah. Another player prop coming from the chat from Big Cheesy, Yelich over 1.5 total bases at plus 117.
Yeah, I mean, I like it overall. Yelich is a guy who I've actually been fading in prize picks recently, unsuccessfully in a couple of games. I think he went over one of his totals against a lefty, but against a soft throwing righty, I really like him, especially leading off. I think this is a perfect matchup for Yelich. Especially with how the Brewers lineup is starting to heat up lately. So I do think he hits that over.
Yeah, so Steven has this highlighted right now. The overs hit in about 41% of home games this season. So he's does it a little bit better at home. He struggled a little bit in the past 2 weeks, looks like. But I like this play against over.
Right. And we'll move over to one more chat question. And if anyone has other MLB questions, please put them in the chat. Kevin Charles asking about the Reds versus Angels, if we have any value there.
Yeah, so this one, we'll check the database. But so this one's interesting for me because it's Lucas Giolito against Graham Ashcraft. And remember, they have a doubleheader tomorrow. The game that was rained out yesterday was moved to Wednesday, not today. So it's just a single game today. Graham Ashcraft is one of those guys that when he starts pitching well, he just gets on a roll, and he's extremely streaky. I believe he has a quality start in 7 of his last 8 appearances now. So he's been pitching extremely well. Lucas Giolito on the other side, he's he hasn't been great since he's been acquired by the Angels. He's kind of reverting back to his old stuff in terms of allowing a lot of walks and allowing a lot of home runs. The only thing is the Reds are really struggling against righties lately. They're ranked 22nd in the league against righties since the All-Star break, but the Angels are ranked 24th in the league against righties since the All-Star break. So neither team's hitting righties well. So basically, and then the Angels bullpen has also been the second worst in the league since the All-Star break. While the Reds has been a lot better. I don't remember their exact number, but they're top half in the league. So basically what I'm getting at here is this game is essentially it's pick 'em, and the Reds are plus 120. So in a game where I think as a pick 'em, I'm definitely going to follow the dog there.
Right. Trout's back today. Is today his first day back, right?
I don't know. Is it? I didn't see.
I think the rumor was he's going to be back today.
Okay, interesting.
And
so that definitely plays into this game quite a bit.
Then, so if that is true, guys, that's something where you would want to, if we're going to play the Reds, we do not want to play it now, right? So we want to wait for the lineup to come out, because as soon as Trout is in the lineup and everyone sees that, all the money will go on to the Angels. So that line will just keep skyrocketing. And say if it doesn't skyrocket, we still know the money's all coming in on the Angels. Then we know something's up with the line, right? So the book's probably keeping it there in the first place. So that's something to be aware of for sure.
Right. And we saw someone, Nick was mentioning in the chat, the Orioles, the Blue Jays were going to get after the Orioles pitcher, but Jake had a play here for yes run first inning. And this is something you and Steven have been working on, right?
Yeah, so Steven implemented this into the database right around a week ago. And so you see we have yes run first inning in 60.3% of the simulations, which equates to minus 152. The line is minus 115 on DraftKings, so there's decent value there. And this is a matchup between Kikuchi and Grayson Rodriguez. Kikuchi is worse on the road. He has a 4.62 ERA on the road over the last couple of seasons. And Grayson Rodriguez, he's a rookie, but look at those numbers that Steven's highlighting since he's debuted at home. He's a 6.94. He gives up quite a bit of home runs, so I wouldn't mind a home run prop there for the Blue Jays. A big factor here is Vladdy exited yesterday early, so right now we have him in, but that could change if he's out of the lineup. But I still think there'd be some value in the yes run first inning. Kikuchi had a really good start against Baltimore his last time out, but if you look over the last two seasons, Baltimore's had his number. Especially when he was coming out of the bullpen last season, he got hit pretty hard against the Blue Jays. Here, Steven's going to show you his game log.
He allowed three earned and 4 2/3 the first time against the Orioles this season. Then I believe it was 3 earned and 4 the second time, and then he allowed 1 earned in 6 innings the most recent time.
Yeah, so there you see some of his player props. I just think I could see either Toronto or Baltimore scoring in the first. I think this is a hitter-friendly matchup between Kikuchi, who's gotten hit hard, and Grayson Rodriguez, who's a rookie against an experienced Toronto lineup. And I was kind of surprised to see that at minus 115. I think that's taking into the account that they expect Vladdy to be out of the lineup. What do you think, John?
I think it's more just the public sees Kikuchi and Grayson Rodriguez and immediately assumes that if they're both going to pitch well, they'll both pitch well in the first inning. But this is the 4th time that Kikuchi's faced the Orioles this season. This is the 3rd time that the Blue Jays have faced Rodriguez this season. And it's a division matchup. So when you see a guy a lot, you tend to know his tendencies and usually are able to capitalize on it. And these top pitchers, especially when they're going well, you can usually get to them in the first inning when they're not settled in yet. So I really like to play in the first inning as well.
Cool.
Yeah, we have another question here. I'll just put it up. Came in while we're on the topic from TJ Parker about the same game today. A lot going on here. Bo and Vlad and Witt all over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs, and also Mountcastle at 1.5.
So, yeah. So overall, I don't think there's going to be a ton of offense overall in the game. Both offenses have been somewhat quiet overall lately, the Blue Jays and the Orioles, especially if a guy like Vladdy's out. I think I would probably lean under in that. But then we go to the players. So Robbie Witt is one of the hottest guys in the league right now. I think any over is a good play there. Vlad, obviously, you have to watch out for because, as Jake mentioned, he left early yesterday. So you want to make sure that he's in the lineup. And then Ryan Mountcastle is definitely the obvious one. He absolutely destroys the Blue Jays. I don't know the exact numbers, but he absolutely owns them.
And he's been on fire lately, Mountcastle. So I like a Mountcastle matchup against Yusei Kikuchi here.
Yeah, and the lefty too. So
exactly. Look at his hit streak, or he's hit and it looks like 7 games in a row. And then since he's returned from the IL, I think he's hitting like all but 1 game. So yeah, look at those numbers against Toronto.
Like 10 hits in his last series against the Blue Jays.
Yeah,
or get something absurd like that.
And when you know you have a team's number, that's in your head. You're feeling confident. You're liking the matchup. He kills lefties. He kills the Blue Jays. So Mountcastle is going to come up to the plate with all the confidence in the world.
Yeah.
Speaking of confident players, we'll move over to Jake's last home run prop with Matt Olson home run at plus 310 on FanDuel. What makes you confident in this today?
I just think this is a good matchup for him against Tyler McGill. We have him at plus 280. I was surprised to see Matt Olson above plus 300 anywhere really. And I think this is a game where there could be quite a bit of scoring. And if you want to play Dinger Tuesday, you get $5 back for every player in that game who hits a home run. So even if Matt Olson doesn't hit a home run, I think this is a good matchup between Bryce Elder, who actually looked really good against the Yankees, but the Mets had their best offensive game in a while yesterday. They put up 10 runs against the Braves. Francisco Lindor went yard. DJ Stewart has gotten yard in 4 of the last 5 games. I mean, the Mets have sucked, but they're starting to put up some runs. And Bryce Elder shut out the Yankees. I think he gave up 1 hit, but I think he's susceptible to getting hit hard by the Mets today. And I think Tyler McGill is going to struggle against this murderous row of Braves players. Cool. So I like Matt Olson to go yard here.
Cool. Well, we'll keep looking out for these MLB picks in the chat. John and Jake will be in the chat answering all of your questions. But we are now going to switch it over to our our fantasy football, some of our draft picks. So we talk about a lot of the fantasy football today experts and what they have. I'm sure you guys have been listening there. But we want to show you kind of where we deviate from that and where we think there might be value that they aren't seeing. So we're going to start with running backs. And of course, as always, be asking questions about, where are you in your fantasy draft? What kind of questions you have, certain players, certain positions. We really do have answers for it all. So John and Jake are going to head into the chat for the rest of the MLB, and me, Steven, and Derek will take over. So we'll start with our running backs. We'll start with Etienne. So if you look to the left, you have what our model's projection is. We have him ranked 17 versus fantasy football. Today's consensus is ranked at 11. We have him a bit downgraded. A lot of this has to do with the target share that we think could go down. You have Bigsby, and then you also have a bottom 10 offense in this time of possession. Derek, I know you talked a lot about that. So it's a tough situation because he is the unquestioned, undoubtable RB1, but there is still that target share.
Yeah, so about the time of possession, here's the problem with the Jaguars. So their defense gives up a ton of yards to opposing teams. So then that cuts down on the amount of possession times for the Jaguars. So that puts even more emphasis on them to score points. And so that means you're going to have less amount of possessions and less time to actually score. So that doesn't bode well for somebody that most likely not going to have as many rushing yards as last year, because as we saw at the end of last year, the last 3 games, the Jaguars are passing the ball more than they did running.
And Mackenzie, the real facts behind the model, and I think the reason why the experts are high on Etienne is because Etienne was a superior receiving running back in college. Obviously played with Trevor Lawrence, so there's a lot of feeling that that's one of his values, like a McCaffrey or a Kamara. But I have his game log. His career high in a single game is 3 catches, and he's never been targeted more than 5 times. So for whatever reason, he isn't being used the same way as a pro as he was at Clemson. Now, that could change. There's going to be more of an emphasis on passing the ball even more, which you might think would hurt his ranking. But if the increased attempts go with a lot of checkdowns to Etienne, then his value could go up. So again, I don't want to debate myself, but that's really what the inflection point is. So if you have a lot of faith in him being used as a receiver, and he becomes one of those elite players, and in PPR, that his ranking is going to be more like the Fantasy Football Today guys.
Right. Yeah, because you look at his ceiling, we have a ceiling relatively high. Am I wrong there?
Yeah. Yeah. So the ceiling. So how we calculate the ceiling and low is that's a per game basis, not a season long basis. And in a per game basis, we basically took a look at what if he does a standard deviation better in every stat. And then you combine that, and then so I take that projection, divide it by the percentage, the actual projection. So his 175% ceiling means that if he's projected for 10 points, he has a ceiling of say 24.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have that for a lot of them. We can move to Kenneth Walker. We have him ranked a lot higher than the fantasy football experts do. A lot of this has to do with his target share at the goal line. 76.2% of rushes inside the 10-yard line. We have him projected at 9 rushing touchdowns. But I can understand where the fantasy football experts come for, because they're talking about splitting carries. And they do have a really tough second half of the season as a running back.
Yeah. I mean, this is coming. Zach Charbonnet is a very good running back, but he's more of a third down back, I think. Maybe better in pass protection than Walker, which may not be saying much. But this is just the belief that in our projection, Walker is getting around 9 rushing touchdowns because of his heavy usage in the goal line. So that's why we still like him as top 20, despite that, he averaged 13.5 fantasy points last year, and we only have him projected for 10.6. Mm-hmm. So like everyone, we're recognizing Charbonnet could cut in significantly to his production, but it's still probably good for top 20, as long as you feel like his role as a goal line back is stable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So last year, 10 yards to go to goal line, Walker has had 76% of the rushing attempts for the Seahawks. I don't see that going down anytime soon. I mean, it's going to pretty much hover between that. And last year, he had the most touches inside of the 10-yard line with 33. So he's being the workhorse compared to anybody else in the league at the goal line. Right.
And we talk about one more running back that it's tough to figure out, because so the thing about James Cook is obviously he's going to get more target share. Josh Allen, they're saying that the strategy will be to limit his rushes, limit him getting hit. But when it comes to the actual goal line running back, you will have Josh Allen and you will have Harris to compete with, which obviously ends up being a lot of your fantasy points. So what's the situation with Cook here? Because I know it's tough to figure out what means more, either those target shares everywhere else in the field or at the goal line.
Yeah, we're only projecting under 5 rushing touchdowns for Cook, because I think at best he'll be 1/3 of the goal line carries with Harris, who had 15 rushing touchdowns 2 seasons ago, and with Josh Allen, who, Derek, you have the number, had some ridiculous percentage of their goal line rushes, right?
Josh Allen inside of the 5-yard line had 61% of the rush attempts for the Bills.
So even if they try to protect him and that goes down to 40 or 35, then you still have that 1/3 pie. And I looked it up, Devin Singletary gone, and people think Cook could be a more efficient, better version of Singletary, but I think it's our projection of 29th is right in line with where Singletary's average based projection was. Based on his average, he would have been 28 last year. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we have Cook.
Right. And Nick, again, in the chat is asking, we'll go a little off script with our running backs here, asking about Jahmyr Gibbs for the Lions. What do we think about him, and where do we rank him?
Let's see. I'm in my latest projection, which is in flux a little bit. I had to make some alterations based on how awesome Zay Flowers is. I know that has something to do with this question. I just want to do my weekly Ravens promo. If you don't see a running back on our list, it's because we don't actually rank them that differently from the Fantasy Football Today guys, and not enough to make any kind of real movement in terms of a draft. But if you guys have specific questions, we might do another secret meeting show, or not secret, but a meeting show later in the week, and we'll answer all these. Gibbs, we have him at 16th, and the experts have him moved him up to 14th recently in PPR. We both have him 20th in standard leagues. This is just a case where, we really don't have any. You can see, that 0.1 more, and he's already, he's 15th. 0.4 more per game, and he's where the experts have him. So he's properly ranked.
Right. And then another quarterback being talked about, or another running back being talked about in the chat is Tony Pollard, who again will be getting that higher target share. But is the injury a risk? And do we factor injury heavily into the models?
Yeah, it is. Everybody, if you see the projected averages here, they're always lower than the actual averages because most players are playing 13 games. So say they're 14 games and they're losing injury. And so they might average, 15 over 14 games. We are fast. So every player in the NFL has a reasonably high injury risk. And so we're averaging out. They are being injured in the simulations. At the same time, we're counting them over 17 games as if they stay healthy for everything. So there's think about a 90% chance of getting hurt in every game. So that's why our projected average is actually less. Some players are a little bit even more, like Tua or even Justin Fields for if we think that the reasons that their injury risk is higher for X, Y, and Z. So Pollard, we have him properly ranked right around the same spot as the experts go. Because we also like
Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn.
Let
me see if I can find him on our list real quick.
So he's been very explosive. So he's most likely going to be the backup running back for them. So he's going to take some carries, but I think that we pretty much think that Pollard is going to get a lot of those carries as Zeke did during his rookie season.
The experts don't have Vaughn ranked in their top 60 for running backs, at least on a consensus basis. We have him, ranked 60th. So that's cutting into it.
Yeah. So we talked about, the injury again. We can move over to quarterbacks. Justin Fields, someone that would always be a concern. We have him pretty in line with the fantasy football consensus, just ranked a little bit lower. But we talk about always that weak offensive line. You can only do so much with a weak offensive line. And then there are rumors of him maybe trying to rush less to preserve this health.
Yep. Yeah, so we have him projected for actually just under 1,000 rushing yards, which is way off on a per game basis. I think a lot of reason to be positive with DJ Moore there, but I just looked up before the show. If you want to pop my screen on, Mackenzie, a second, that it really comes down to Fields' completion percentage. And he went from around 59% to 60%, maybe 61%. And so we have him projected at like that 62, 63%. There's reason to think that it could be higher than that, right? When you had Jalen Hurts had a huge leap from year 2 to year 3. DJ Moore, I looked into his receptions versus targets. So this obviously he's a kind of a big play receiver, and Carolina's been terrible. But for the last 3 years, his reception divided by target percentage, completion percentage, is lower than the Carolina quarterback completion percentage. So in our model, we aren't assuming that DJ Moore is making the team better. More yards per reception, more open running lanes for the traditional running backs, many other areas. But in terms of actual Fields completion percentage, we're not projecting a skyrocket thing because DJ Moore is there. Partly because of those numbers. So that's why we have him slightly under what the experts have. But he is also our highest ceiling quarterback on this list. So yeah, if he can stay healthy and he still runs the way he did, I just don't think he does. Again, if you want to take my quick look at my database here, if you look at the projection for Chicago Bears, there's a lot of good running backs on this team. Khalil Herbert, everyone's excited about. Dante Foreman, a few years back when he filled in for Derrick Henry, had games that was better than Derrick Henry was for Tennessee. And he is better for Carolina than McCaffrey was because of his size. And then Roschon Johnson, everyone's excited about him as this. So they have 3 running backs the Fantasy Football Today experts would rank in the top, 60. Presumably to give fewer carries for Fields.
So if you have 3 great running backs like that, it makes you really not as high on Justin Fields, given he doesn't have to do all the running himself anymore.
Yeah, they want to preserve him after what happened last year.
Yeah, valid, as they should.
Yeah.
Someone running a little. Well, actually, let's go to Anthony Richardson. I saw someone asking about him in the chat, talking about to lead the league in rushing yards. Now I don't think we have him there, but we have him projected for 1,000 rushing yards.
Well, that's we think alike. Not that we think that in light of what's going on with Jonathan Taylor. So we have Anthony Richardson at only 16th. Fantasy Football Today had him at 10th. I know I'm a homer. All I care about is Lamar Jackson. But the fact is, Richardson, when Lamar took over for Baltimore in his rookie year, when he was not a good passer, he played 7 regular season games, went 6-1 in those games. He averaged 17 rushes a game and I think around 70 yards and 0.6 touchdowns. We're projecting Richardson for 12 carries a game, similar yards per carry and similar touchdowns per carry, but again, at a lower rush rate. If Jonathan Taylor is traded and they just say, okay, Anthony Richardson, you're now essentially the starting running back and the starting quarterback. If you gave him Lamar's stats, who averaged 20.1 fantasy points as a rookie in regular season, then Richardson's 19.1 goes to 20.1, and all of a sudden he becomes QB 11. So draft Richardson if you think they're actually going to get a first-round pick for Jonathan Taylor, and move on from him.
Right. And another thing you can use as a pro is he's coached under Shane Steichen, who coached Jalen Hurts, and we talk about how that is the kind of coach that he needs, and maybe it could help him develop, as everyone's worried about. I mean, he obviously is a rookie, but he has a lot to work out on. So maybe Shane Steichen's the right coach for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to point out the 5th toughest rush efficiency defense. So literally they're going to have to run the ball more in order for Richardson to gain some yards. So take it as this. If they have to, if a normal day for a running back, let's say he was rushing 20 times and getting 100 yards, it's going to take him more attempts, probably 25, to reach the 100 yards. So with this defense that they're going against this year, all of the defenses collectively together, it's going to be a little difficult for him to, keep that up as long as he stays healthy. But he's going to probably take a beating with all of these very good run defenses that they're going to be going against.
Look, the good thing about being on a bad team, assuming he's on a bad team, is that you get a lot of quarterbacks not only get prevent defenses that allow them to get easy 15, 20-yard completions, it also gets easy 15, 20-yard runs. I think about, again, I'm a Ravens homer and I see everything through that lens, but when we got upset in Lamar's MVP season by Tennessee, Lamar had 500 total yards. He had like 130 rushing yards. Didn't matter because we were down by so much, and they were just, they didn't defend, like a normal situation. So he was running free for a lot of those times. So Richardson might be able to get some of these explosive plays, down 14 in the fourth quarter.
Right. And we talk about, I want to talk about a quarterback who maybe not as many people are on, that we are actually really high on, ranked at number 10, Jared Goff. A lot of this has to do with facing a weaker pass defense, and I believe just facing a weaker quarterback defense in general.
Yeah. So, I mean, people are raving about Laporta, the tight end rookie. He's looked good. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs is even arguably an upgrade as a receiver at the running back position. Jameson Williams has a 6-game suspension, but will be presumably healthy after that. Marvin Jones comes back from his few years in Jacksonville. The opposing defense this year is the equivalent of the 19th best passer rating defense. The thing I like about Detroit is most people I see, national media and gambling markets, are very high on Detroit because of how they finished the second half of last season, both offensively and defensively. So the general consensus among smart people, i.e. the people setting the odds and lines, is that is the team that you expect the Lions to be the second half season. And the last 7 games, he averaged over 23 and a half fantasy points versus just 17 and a half in his first 10. So if you buy into the Lions hype and you think that they are more the team that you saw in the second half of last season as opposed to the first half, then Goff is more of that 20-plus point per game quarterback and would put some 10th. They have a very good offensive line, so he's not like Kirk Cousins, who's getting at risk of getting battered, which is good for his floor.
Right. And
And you know what is coincidence about how they played better at the end of last season? They did not have TJ Hawkinson. And so with him leaving, he actually distributed the ball even more. Actually, his passing percentage went up basically 2 percentage points in completions. So they pretty much improved. So, I mean, I understand why they have him at 17, most likely because of the thin wide receiver group.
Because he's Jared Goff.
Well, hey, I know
it doesn't seem right.
He can't get over that stereotype of what people think about him. But, hey, I mean, the numbers
he went from 32 touchdowns that one year to 22 the next year. And when you lose a bunch of people's fantasy leagues, then it's just hard to – it's like when a team consistently costs you money at gambling. It's like I still remember that coach from West Virginia back in 2007, 2008. And it's like, it just stays with you. And so you lose fantasy leagues in 2020 whenever he had that fall off. It stays with you.
So let's talk about a quarterback that a lot of people are high on, maybe too high. If you're a big Tua fan, this might not be the right place for you. We talk about his over-under for receiving yards. Correct me if I'm wrong. We talked about this a few weeks ago. A big thing we have with Tua is that the passing defense they are facing this season is so difficult, which no matter who you are, makes your job difficult on the other side as quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, people think that we're trying to just show that the opposing defense last year would be the equivalent of the 12th best defense on average, which is by far the hardest you see. The number of playoff teams they play this year, that Tua faced only six playoff teams last year.
Yeah, 6 or 8.
And it's a weird criticism. He did so well in those games on average, 2.2 touchdowns, 22 fantasy points. But again, it was all fueled by this 50 pass attempts, ridiculous game where the Ravens secondary got battered, and we had Kyle Hamilton guarding Jalen Waddle. We had Jalen Armour-Davis guarding Tyreek Hill one-on-one. And so that's not going to happen. And I think Miami is a good team. Miami is too good to fall behind consistently by this much to allow for 50 pass attempts in the first place. And even if you remove the Cincinnati game where he got hurt, you talk about, again, when he faced really good competition, barely completing over 50% of his passes, barely over 200 yards, and 17 fantasy points a game. So when you look at their schedule, the only bad, quote unquote, bad pass defense he faces of his playoff opponents is the defending world champs, Kansas City. So his toughest game, arguably, is his best, most favorable matchup. And then the teams that didn't make the playoffs is brutal. I mean, he's done well against the Patriots, but still, you have the greatest defensive mind in history. You have the Broncos and one of the second best corner probably in the league. Got Carolina, who's emerging. The Jets, obviously, everyone's all hyped. The Raiders, while not great, they are pretty good in touchdowns allowed, and they do have a great edge rusher and a formerly great other one, and they potentially have two. And the Titans were really good 2 years ago before injuries took them down last year. So he just has he's not going to be Jamie Eisenberg's start of the week at any point, given his matchups.
Right. So we'll stop with quarterbacks there for now. Obviously, keep the questions coming in the chat. We'll move over to tight ends, starting with Kyle Pitts, someone we're not necessarily as high on as the fantasy football experts, but we do like the idea of the high target share he's getting. I mean, it's really just him. He's one of two players that are ranked fantasy receivers on this team.
Yeah, if you want to pop my screen for a second. So Kyle Pitts really comes down to 2 years ago, he didn't score many touchdowns, but he had, he caught over 60% of the balls thrown targeted and had over 1,000 yards. But that was with Matt Ryan. But then last year he had, inaccurate quarterbacks who are known for their running, Mariota and Desmond Ridder. So the number of percentage of his targets that he actually completed was around 50%, which is more like what you want to see from a, big play wide receiver. So in our model with Ridder back, he is third in projected targets. And so I think that the Fantasy Football Today experts and a lot of people are high on him think that his catch percentage is going to go back up to normal, at least tight end average, which would be around 60%. And so his number of receptions would be more like 60, approach 70. His yards would again approach 900 or plus, probably 5 touchdowns, which would place him right around this 4 spot. But I haven't seen anything in the training camp reports. Still Desmond Ridder. He just doesn't have that chemistry, it seems like. I mean, his last 20 receptions before he got targets last year, before he got hurt, he caught 7 of them. And in that same amount of time, everybody else caught 70%. Mm-hmm. So there's just something not right about that. So really it comes down to his chemistry with Ridder, and what percent of the targets he's going to catch. I mean, I think he's a physical freak, but I don't think anyone ever says, "Oh, he's the greatest route running tight end of all time." He's not like Kelsey. Kelsey is the guy who can get 130 targets and actually catch 78% of them. Is why he's clearly the best.
Right. Yeah, the issue with Pitts is he doesn't score touchdowns. The backup tight end scored more touchdowns than him. Kyle Pitts scored 2 receiving touchdowns, and then the backup tight end, he scored 4. So that doesn't bode well in fantasy. Yes, he can catch balls and possibly get receiving yards. If he goes back to what his rookie year season, where he had over 1,000 yards receiving, and he also had Matt Ryan, which is a better quarterback. Unfortunately, I'm sorry not to harp on Mariota, but Mariota is not as good. So if you have a better quarterback, if Ridder can actually pass the ball well and understand the offense, then it's a possibility that he could. But we haven't seen that he can actually score touchdowns. In fantasy, you need to score points.
And there is a decent chance. I thought Algier was really good as a running back last year, and then they got Bijan Robinson. There is a chance his team runs the ball 55% of the time.
That's what I was going to ask.
Even with the largest target share in the world, you're just not getting enough passing attempts.
Because with a rookie quarterback, you can imagine that they're likely going to run the ball a lot more on top of a team that already was running the ball.
And then one thing people love last year in passing on offense, at 44% of the time they passed the ball. So they're a running team unless Ridder.
And then it's going to be worse with Bijan, and then Bijan, when they do pass, a lot of it could be to Bijan Robinson as well. So because we in the fantasy football today experts have him at RB3, so it's it could be tough sledding for Pitts.
Right. And what about, we'll move over to a question in the chat, Waller over 4.5 touchdowns coming in with Daniel Jones. A lot of positive stuff coming out of training camp there.
Yeah, let me check out. Let's see. This is the data that is specifically goes to the Fantasy Football Today show graphics, and they didn't like decimal points. So let me look at the one they want with decimal points.
So Darren Waller was being targeted a lot in his last preseason game. He was getting open. So we know that he's getting open in those games, like they're at least looking for him. It's just the only times that Daniel Jones has won games is if Barkley averages about 100 yards in a game. So that means that Barkley's going to have to get the ball.
Yeah. But we for projected sake, we are liking Daniel Jones to have a significant increase in touchdowns from 15 passing touchdowns to 22. And we like Waller at nearly 5.5. So at the line for this person's question was what?
4.5.
4.5. So yeah, we actually love it. Health, I guess, has been the issue with Waller the last few years. But yeah, we would go with it. Right. I like the fact that when he plays, his percentage of team passing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns is higher than his percentage of receptions. So he seems to excel most in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to our last tight end and last player that we have planned. Obviously, keep asking questions in the chat about your players. We're happy to stay on. But let's talk about George Kittle here. Another team just stacked with elite players. Now Deebo Samuel's healthy. You have these strong reports from Brandon Ayuk coming out. So is that going to be a significant factor in his target share?
Yeah, it's tough for me to gauge Kittle because you want to say he did so well with Brock Purdy. His average went from 11 fantasy points to 15. But then that was also timed with the Deebo Samuel injury. And when the 3 games that Deebo missed entirely is when Kittle went off at like 67 fantasy points in 3 games. So, I hate to say it, but I think that for Kittle to live up to the model's high ranking, we got to hope for some injuries on San Francisco, which tends to happen, right? McCaffrey or, Deebo or, and hopefully not Kittle for this specific ranking. The thing is, though, if the choice is Kittle versus Kyle Pitts, because we have him fourth, we have Kittle fourth, Pitts seventh, FFT has reverse 7 and 4, then I'm comfortable with Kittle over Pitts.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see, the target share and the health. That could be a problem for Kittle's ranking.
Yeah, so Kittle, he's third in receiving intent. Well, he's responsible for 20% of the receiving receptions for the 49ers. So that's third on their team. That is behind Brandon Ayuk. Oh, no, that's behind Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. So he's already behind the 8 ball there. I mean, yes, during those 3 games, he did have 5 touchdowns in those 3 games that Deebo Samuel was out. But I mean, with that timeshare, but he does score touchdowns. So he was second in tight ends and touchdowns with 11. That was right behind Kelsey.
Yeah, when he plays, he accounted for 32% of the team's receiving touchdowns and 20.7% of the team's receptions. So that's a nice 50% jump in touchdown production.
And so with Brandon Ayuk, he, another reason why, Kittle might have a hard time getting receptions. Brandon Ayuk, from some of the players on the 49ers, they were saying that he's been open since the day training camp has started. So he's been getting the ball in training camp. Brandon Ayuk is more confident than ever. He had his most receptions and receiving yards last year, over 1,000 receiving yards. So with him in the lineup, he's going to gain more attention because of all of the other weapons that they have. So somebody's going to have to be open, and most likely these teams are going to let Brandon Ayuk be open and not let Kittle kill him like he did last year. And then, unless we want to touch on something else with this.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I'm getting from this is if you're drafting a Niners player, you're going to hope for some injuries somewhere else on the rest of the roster.
Yeah.
We have a question about Isaiah Pacheco, top 10 running back. If he can get more receiving work, is he going to be a fantasy player you want given that?
I love Pacheco, but
I like his running.
he probably cost the running back position like millions of dollars because he came from nowhere and excelled. So right now, Pacheco.
Who's watching Rutgers games?
We don't have him, because he was barely used. Because they still have Jerick McKinnon, who really excelled as the receiver, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still around and still a threat for touches. I don't think they're gonna put Pacheco in there as a receiving threat and change his role. So we like Pacheco still in PPR at more than the experts, slightly 25th versus 29th for the Fantasy Football Today experts, but not top 10. Not when they kept McKinnon.
Right. And we'll move back over to the running backs in Atlanta, another target share situation. Obviously, Bijan projected to be a pretty significant factor for fantasy, but what do you think about their carries?
Yeah, so we have, Algier, we have Bijan exactly where the Fantasy Football Today experts have. We have him, a pretty dynamic over 5 yards per carry, which is a very good number when you consider everyone knows he's going to get the ball and he's going to run it. But we like Algier more than the FFT guys, 10 spots ahead. Again, I'm sorry I'm so Ravens biased. But yeah, his 18 rushes on 74 yards and pretty good receiving numbers in that Ravens game from late last year really stuck with me. And you saw how he ended last year. He was tearing it up. And so this guy is, looks like Saquon Barkley's legs could fit in his. So he's I think Patterson will probably be the one who drops out of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
But I like both the running backs for Atlanta.
They could put Patterson, just have him out as being a wide receiver too. So he's very versatile.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll move over to one more question. With Evan Ingram, we'll go back With Trevor Lawrence last season, his line's only at 3.5. Where does the model put him?
3.5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Ingram, is there a juice on the line? We have him at 3.8. So if it's even money, then we like the over. If it's like minus 115, but if it's like minus 130, then probably not.
Right.
So shop around because those numbers can vary pretty significantly book to book.
Right. Yeah. So I think that will be it for our questions right now for our fantasy people, but we will absolutely be addressing questions again. I believe on Thursday, we'll do another casual live stream, live meeting show. So stay tuned for that. Probably going to be around the same time, maybe right after Early Edge around 11 o'clock. Any more MLB questions, you can always reach out to us on Twitter. I know John and Jake are happy to answer. But before we do that, we did have a question on Cooper Kupp and Deebo and who you would take first. We wanted to address it from last meeting show. So Derek, if you wanted to get into that super quick before we head out.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, in theory, when you're looking at real football, you will say that there's, they were close together with Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel. However, when we look at our fantasy rankings, we have Cooper Kupp as number 3 and Deebo Samuel as number 18 wide receiver. Cooper Kupp gets 32% of the receptions for the Rams, and it was only 20% for Deebo Samuel. So the Rams are either going to be good or bad this year. Either way it goes, Cooper Kupp is going to get the ball and get touchdowns, rather in garbage time or in actual competitive games. Deebo Samuel, we really don't know. And Cooper Kupp most likely will get another 1,000 yards receiving.
Right.
Yeah, look at the names. You compare the 49ers of the receivers, you compare them to what Kupp's got. Van Jefferson is the only one that people are probably aware of. And Marcus Robinson, Ravens' last leading wide receiver last year. So Ben Skoranek. It's like, no, there's no threat in the target sheet.
That's the wide receiver tight end. Don't disrespect the man.
and the thing, like the Rams' lack of talent is kind of pronounced because if you add up these percentages, they don't come close to even 100%. So it's like in the model, what happens is, Cooper Kupp may have had 33% of the team's receptions when he played. But if the entire roster adds up to 90, 80%, then that 33 ended up being 40 in actuality. So he's just, and as Derek pointed out, if the Rams are surprisingly good, it's because Kupp had a great year. If they're terrible and he's still playing, he can get some garbage time yards.
Right. All right. Well, good to know. Again, any questions you guys have, put them on Twitter. We'll get to them on Thursday, definitely. But that's all we have time for today. So thank you for all the questions. Keep the chat alive. Keep it up on Twitter. And we will hopefully see you guys Thursday. If not,